What's up YouTube, it's Willie here with Spaceman Aquatics, bringing you another video on today. Today's topic is going to be filtration. So I did briefly go over the nitrogen cycle in the previous video. We went over that before, and today is going to be about filtration, which is going to be the biggest driving component in how successful you are at maintaining the nitrogen cycle and even starting the nitrogen cycle. So without any further ado, could you please comment, like, share, and subscribe to the video so we can grow here on YouTube. Let's go ahead and begin with the video. So I want to go ahead and start off by stating what the definition of filtration is and go over the different types of filtration so that you all as beginners, or even if you are a seasoned vet and you just wanted some extra information that you didn't really know, if you're a seasoned vet you do know about this, but for you newcomers who may have some questions about what to look for when you're starting your tank and what type of filtration you need. So enough rambling. The definition of filtration is going to be the removal of any waste material in your tank. So you can do that of one of three different ways. You can do that mechanically, which is going to be the physical removal of any materials in your tank. That's going to be your maybe if you have any dying plants, even any dying fish, food, dirt. If you ever seen little specks of things floating around in the tank, that'll get sucked up into the water or into your filter somehow and be filtered out physically. Now that is your mechanical filtration. The second type of filtration is you have biological filtration. Biological filtration is the pretty much microbial filtration. Essentially, what the nitrogen cycle is. That is biological filtration, and I'll go deeper into what biological filtration is as we go through the video. The final form of filtration is going to be chemical filtration. Chemical filtration is going to be the chemical removal via carbon or other chemicals in your tank. So your ammonia, the nitrates, other waste chemicals, the compounds and things like that, that'll be broken down or be filtered out through a carbon source. That carbon source is usually going to be the filter pack that you'll see in your starter kits. It comes with your hang on the back filter, and I'll explain what a hang on the back filter is in a moment. That's usually that pack that comes in there. That's mechanical filtration, the carbon that is in there. So let's go ahead, now that you have a basic understanding of what filtration is and what it does for your tank, let's explain the different types of filtration. The first type of filtration, we mentioned it just a moment ago, is an HOB or hang on the back filter. That's going to be that big black box that you're going to see on the back of a tank. Usually it's going to be a tube coming from the box, going into the inside of the tank as an intake. It's powered by a little motor that is in the box that spins around, and it causes a suction to go up the tube into the back of the chamber, and then filter out by that filter floss or that filter cartridge that I explained. Now that filter cartridge, it's nothing but a polyester filter floss with carbon stuffed in it. Now that filter floss is going to act as a mechanical filter, which is going to physically block any materials from going back into the tank after it gets sucked up into the intake, and the carbon acts as a chemical filter, as I explained earlier. Now with maintaining the hang on the back filter, it's pretty easy. Every couple of weeks or so you probably want to get rid of that filter cartridge and dump out the old water into a bucket, or what I like to do is I usually don't use those filter cartridges. I don't really use chemical filtration so much. What I put in my hang on the back filters is I usually stuff it either with extra sponges. Alright, this is Future Willie here. I just wanted to cut in to give an example of what I meant by hang on the back filter and what I like to put into my filtration system. So here it is. This is the polyester filter floss that I explained. This is an example of a hang on the back filter. Again, here's the tube I explained that goes down into the tank. Here is the big black box and here is the back where your filter medium would go, where it's going to be mechanical, which is this stuff, chemical, which is going to be the carbon that would usually be in here in a kit, or biological, which will probably colonize in here, will be all the bacteria. So I just like to stuff this stuff. I like to put this all in the back, and as you can see, boom, it's all in the back here. Again, I just get the polyester filter floss, I dump it all in the back. It's all in here. The water goes up through the tube, back through here, any floating material, any hard materials is going to be blocked by this filter floss. I usually change this out quite often, so that's why I like to have two types of filtration in my tanks when I have this, or maybe I'll put a small sponge in there and I'll put a little bit of this floss over top of it so that that sponge can house all the bacteria that I need. But yeah, here is the example of a hang on the back filter and how I like to set them up. Back to the video. The biological medium that I explained actually helps with biological filtration. I explained that earlier. So what that does is that gives a source of surface area for the bacteria that we explained in the nitrogen cycle. That will be your anaerobic bacteria and your natural bacter bacteria. That gives that surface area to colonate and help aid in the breaking down of waste in your tank. So with your hang on the back filter, you usually get 3 types of filtration all in one. And actually with most of these filters that will go on the list, we'll do the same thing. With that being said, let's go on to the second most common type of filtration that you will see in the community, which is a canister filter. These canister filters will come in 2 styles. You have your internal and your external. I personally like the external because that gives you pretty much the entire inside of the tank or the aquarium to work with. That means if you're an aquascaper, you can use a lot more hardscape. That gives a lot more swimming area for the fish as well. So it's a little bit more beneficial to use an external filter, a canister filter. But I'll explain what a canister filter is. Essentially, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a canister that is being used instead of a hang on the back canister, which is what I explained before. It's the same basic concept. You again with the external, usually they're a lot larger, which gives you a lot more surface material or surface area for colonies. So I usually like those, especially on the larger tanks. You get larger fish, or fish that eat a little bit messier. Those canister filters are great because they're usually a little bit more powerful, and they're a lot more quieter than a hang on the back filter. Again, as I stated with the hang on the back filter, you pretty much get all the components of a mechanical, biological, and chemical filter all in one. You can put carbon inside those canister filters as well, very similar to the hang on the back filters. You can get all in one. Which leads me to the next filtration system that you can use here is with the internal canister filter. The internal canister filter does something very similar, but it's more like a hang on the back filter but inside of the tank. It's usually user's choice with that type of filtration. Again, it's more of a hassle in my opinion than it is an asset, because again you're using up space on the inside of the tank, and in my opinion it's just, you have a risk of leaking out waste into the tank whenever you're trying to do maintenance. If you pull out the canister filter, the internal canister filter out the wrong way, you could allow for waste material to fall into the tank, and then that could be hazardous to the fish or the living things that are inside of the tank. Now the next type of filtration is one of my favorites. Is going to be sponge filtration. What sponge filtration is going to be pretty much very similar to what I explained earlier as far as the biological filtration. It does the same thing. It's just a biological filter for the most part. Its components is going to be a sponge, usually a tube, and an airline hose. The airline hose goes through the tube, and the tube is connected to the sponge. The way it works is air is going through the sponge and then back up through the tube. What that does is, if you understand basic physics, what that does is that actually pulls water through the sponge, through the pores of the sponge, and then back up through the tube, carried out back into the tank. So it somewhat acts, if you can see that is exactly what we explained with the other filters, but in a very unique way. Now this is more, again, this is more of an asset as far as biological filtration. You may see something like this in your local pet store, your mom or pop pet store. They usually have those lined up in all their tanks because it's very easy, and again, that's a lot of bacteria that is going to be held and colonized in that type of filtration, and it usually serves a very good way to break down ammonia and other harmful chemicals existing in the tank caused by the fish. I usually have these type of filtrations in all of my tanks for the most part, especially if it has messier eaters, or a lot of bottom feeders. Invertebrates like to eat off of those type of filtration systems because they again, there's a lot of microbes that exist on that filtration system. It can become very rich in nutrients as well for the tank, and you can put it in your hospital tank or your sick tanks. It helps and it aids in those type of tanks as well. What I usually do, if I have to set up a hospital tank, I'll just go ahead and grab a sponge filter from an existing tank, put it in the hospital tank. That way it's already cycled and I can start to treat my fish the way they need to be treated. The last and final, or the next filtration system and final type of filtration system is going to be probably my least favorite. It's probably the least common in the community nowadays. It's going to be a under gravel filter. So the way that works is very similar to a sponge filter, where you're having a hose with an airline tube going through the holes, except the hose is usually connected to a false bottom that is under your gravel, preferably gravel. I think people use sand sometimes as well, but what that allows you to do is essentially the same thing. Water is carried through the substrate and then back up through the tube out back into the tank. Now what that does is that uses the substrate itself as a source of filter material, a physical and biological filter medium. The thing about that is when you have to do maintenance on that type of tank, on that type of filter system, you run a very, very high risk, even more so than the internal canister filter, at leaking a lot of waste material back into the tank, and again, that is very, very hazardous. With the sponge filter, you have a very similar hazard, but again, it's easier to contain with a sponge filter. You can usually grab like a bucket and put the sponge in the bucket before you even take it out of the tank. That way you don't have anything leaking out. It's lots of techniques people have, but that under gravel stuff, that under gravel filter can be very hazardous, so please watch out for that. With that being said, I hope this what I had to say today helps you with choosing your next type of filter or your filter system. If you're starting a tank from scratch, I hope that you understand what options you have as far as filtration goes. Again, if you're getting a filter kit or if you're getting an aquarium kit, you're probably just going to end up getting that hang on the back filter. Yeah, I know some companies such as Waterbox and Fluval and sometimes Marina, they do have internal filter systems, but they usually are in a completely separate chamber to maximize the internal space of the tank. So you have those options as well. Again, this is Willie with Spaceman Aquatics. Before I check out here, please comment, like, share, and subscribe so we can grow on YouTube. Thank you for listening.